Welcome, everyone, through all time and space to an all new episode of Weebs on the Weekends, a podcast where we break down the anime news highlights of the week and give a retrospective look at anime that premiered 10 years ago. Today's episode will be covering the nominees for the 2021 Crunchyroll Anime Awards and give our thoughts on whether the first three episodes of Madhouse's Wolverine makes us sus or expect the rest of the series. My name is Jay Johnson. I'm a part-time weeb and full-time English language sensei. And with me, as always, is my co-host Sam Martin as part-time weeb and full-time automail mechanic. Now, Sam, I usually ask you how you're doing, but I really don't care because this anime season of winter 2021 has me all kinds of messed up in the head. So I want you to tell me
I
about
see. I
how,
see.
how
You
has
you
your
mispronounced my name. That's how bad it messed you up.
Sam
You
Martinez,
said Martinez.
Oh, Tintes.
That's a
Oh
new one for
no.
the books. But it's all good. It's all good. I'm just joking with you. So
All right.
why is this season's got you all flustered, my bro?
Oh, I mean, I can go on about that, but I think right now that okay, so talking about at the very beginning where Attack on Titan just put its Titanic PP on the table. I've said this before and I'll say it again,
Yes.
but
Yes.
even more so now, Sam, is that they did that. They messed up the winter anime from last year, and they messed up again this season when they premiered episode 5 on when all the other anime for the season was premiering their first episode, and episode 5 was so much hype and everything happened all at once and it paid off
Yes.
so well. It's like
So good.
yeah, so but other than that, Attack on Titan is starting off strong with Studio Mappa. I mean, there's a lot of hate going around about the use of CGI in that episode, but again, that's something that comes down to animation timing. It's not really a reflection of Studio Mappa. I mean, we've seen that with Jujutsu Kaisen recently, that they're
Yeah.
just a studio that excels well in fluid animation when it comes to fight scenes. Same thing with God of High School. But people are just on Mappa right now because they're like, "Oh, you ruined the last season of Attack on Titan," even though they're going to come right around next episode saying, "Please, sir, give me more." But other than Attack on Titan having a great final season, there's also talking about some S rank anime coming out for contenders of anime of the year is Redo the Healer, which is a outstanding fantasy story about focusing on a healer, which again is they even say in the setup to the story is that healer is like one of the worst classes. But
Yeah.
what's so interesting about the premise is that the healer in the show figures out that healing magic is actually time manipulation magic. And that's how
Oh, so it's sort of like what happens with Orihime in Bleach, whereas she sort of
oh
just turns back time. She doesn't necessarily heal them.
that's a perfect. Oh, I totally did not realize that Bleach comparison, but yeah, I will definitely say that from now on. But yeah, so I don't want to ruin anything because we're not doing a
Okay.
3 episode review, but so Redo the Healer and also Wonder Egg Priority, which is something that is going by everyone's notice, but it has like one of those a made in the abyss kind of animation excellence to it that I think people are going to
Okay.
miss out on. So I'm going to say that. And there's one more. There's a horror detective anime going on right now that no one's talking about.
Ooh, horror
Also,
detective. All
right?
right.
It's Ki Mono Hiji. So
Kimono
first
Hiji.
episode, it has those light Glypanier kind of body horror
Okay.
aesthetics going on, as well as these very creepy Jojo Ito, Gigi. Oh my god, that horror director. Um, oh, Ito. Ito's his family name, but yeah, body horror going on. There's a
Yeah.
great mystery. The detective elements are strong, and it just does everything that a first episode should do. So, but Sam, how are you feeling about winter season right now?
I'm not gonna lie, just it was all the points that you made about Attack on Titan. It's just like Attack on Titan didn't care about who else was trying to make their name or make their claim. They just came out and it was just like, I have a great story to tell. You're going to listen to me. Here I am. And oh my goodness, it was just great, mainly because of where the anime is right now. It was just a great culmination of seeing characters, particularly Eren, because you get to I think we mentioned this before with Attack on Titan. It doesn't really settle in one particular genre, and it sort of changes as time goes on. And you get to see that in its characters, particularly Eren. And where he is right now is sort of like a culmination. And it's just very satisfying seeing his character develop in such a way. And I'm just excited for it. I have been following Ray Zero and Slime. Ray Zero is coming in with the story. It was just like last episode, they had two characters develop at the same time, and one of them was a character from the very beginning who had little to no development up until this time. So it's like, okay, cool, finally. Now we can see what they're going to do as a character, right? And with Slime was a bit of a weak starter, but it seems like it just needs to gain some traction because it's mainly feel good vibes, very light and casual in its nature. I've also been following I'm a Spider, so what? And I like it a little bit more. I would say it's similar to Slime in the sense of like how it does things because the character sort of views the world as a video game, and I would say I feel more attached to the main character because she is not a slime, she's a spider. She loses her legs or she loses a body part, it's permanent or it's semi-permanent to a degree. Like there's a sense of stake within the show. And I've also been looking at Back Arrow. Back Arrow, it's sort of meh right now. I think you might mentioned it once before. It was about the robots and the people who live behind a wall. It's just very casual junk food for anime right now, so I don't really have too much to say about that. Another anime that we mentioned, Skate Infinity. I've been looking into that, and I kind of like it. It's a little bit like with Ezuken and Bakuman in the sense that it deals with shop talk, but in terms of skateboarding. And we get to see things differently because one of the main characters was a proficient snowboarder, but he never learned how to skateboard. So he's sort of having to relearn everything, even though he has like the bases down. It's sort of funny because he goes into this race and he wants to skateboard, but he feels weird on the board, so he literally duct tapes his feet to the skateboard so that he can feel more comfortable. And it seems to be a fun romp in that sense. And I've been wanting to catch up on Beastars and Promise Neverland, but I haven't had the time recently. And now that you mentioned Kimono Hiji, I'm going to have to look into that too because I just love mystery and when the supernatural comes in together with it.
Yeah, I mean, this season is just packed to the brim with. I mean, last episode we talked about like all, or not even last episode, but we talked about some of the original IPs that are going on because this season is stacked with like sequels. So like you mentioned, well, ReZero is having its second core going on right now, and we'll bring it
Yeah.
up when we talk about the Crunchyroll Awards because it's nominated for best antagonist. So I need to get your perspective on that. But we have the
Yeah.
quintessential quintuplets.
Quintuplets.
Yeah, for season two. Yeah, you mentioned Beastar season two, but Cells at Work finally came back for their
Oh,
season
that's
two.
right. That's right. And it was it season 2 or Code Black?
Both. Yeah. So Code Black is
Oh,
a
so they're coming
separate.
out at the same time then.
Exactly. So yeah, Code Black has
Ooh.
its debut, but season two is also coming back for Cells at Work. Log Horizon season three, finally long awaited Big Daddy isekai genre trendsetter back in the day.
Yeah.
Attack on Titan. No, sorry, we already mentioned Attack on Titan, but oh, sorry, what am I thinking about? Seven Deadly Sins. I was trying to think of the Japanese name, but yeah, that has its season four, which is kind of mixed bag because of the last season. One of the most epic fights that was highly expected by fans of the series was very much a letdown. Escanor versus Meliodas. It was one of those things of the animation was just done to a
Dude,
disrespectful content.
it was so janky. We were talking about janky animation earlier, right? Whereas one looked like it should have been like it was really big back when Ruby was coming out, right? I think that was back what 2012, 2011. And dude, just like even this, it's just it didn't even look like it was made in Japan, right? It looked like it was maybe some sort of studio out in Latin America back in the 90s, and like they were trying to add their own thing to the anime, and dude, it was horrible, especially with all the fights that Seven Deadly Sins have given us up until that point.
Mhm.
It was, like you said, it was just a very big letdown.
Yeah, for sure. And then there's also just honorable mentions to this new IP that called Kid from the Last Dungeon, which is another fantasy story that's up there. Is that this kid has been raised in or nearby a town that's by the last dungeon, which has these like god level OP monsters in it, and he's been raised to fight these monsters from a very young age. And he's like, okay, well, I'm the weakest of like these god slayers. And he's like, okay, well, then I'm going to find my worth out in the world. And then he just realizes, oh, the world is so underleveled. I have to hide my abilities or they'll know who I am, that I shouldn't be in this level. So he goes like, he's like, if you're thinking about like it in terms of like Pokemon, he's like, god tier fighting like Rayquaza or Groudon and Kyogre, and he goes to Pallet Town. He's like, oh, what is this Weedle? So it's really enjoyable in the power fantasy escapism.
It's funny that you mentioned that. Have you seen any of Magi or Magi, Magic in the Labyrinth?
I've seen I guess the first season or like the first 20 episodes, but that's it.
Yeah. So do you remember the chick with the red hair who fought with her feet?
Yeah, and how her role kind of just blows up later
Yes.
on, but yeah.
So that the main character that you had just mentioned, it reminds me of her and her character. So her people, they're from another land, like the Dark Continent, I think is what they call it. And with them, like everything is just so overpowering over there. Like their skills and their physical prowess, they have to be strong to contend and to survive in that homeland, correct? But when they come into this side, they're just overpowering, pretty much like Mikasa and Levi is with everybody else. Like they're just like their stats are just so much higher. Where if they compete with anybody else, it's just night and day. And that's what that guy sort of reminds me of. Like you said, like how he just like sort of goes out into the world, and it's funny why he would want to hide himself instead of trying to use his powers to make a name for himself. That's
Yeah,
kind of odd.
yeah, that's fair. But it's like a situation of like he's not supposed to be there. So he has to keep his identity hidden.
Oh,
But he
so if he's
just
found out, he gets in trouble.
right, yeah. But he's
Okay.
like he literally can't do basic things because like he picks up like a broom for the first time and crushes it in his hands. Like that's literally he's just like one man punching everything, but like he doesn't know how to
he's
manage.
he's he's running into the Superman problem where everything is
Right. There you
cardboard
go.
to him.
Yes, okay, that's a better parallel. So like he has to learn how to be essentially human while being in with around other humans. Okay, yeah. But Sam, ready for some news?
Let's do it. Let's get to the news, man.
All right, cool. So we only have one news story because it's all that matters right now. So this
Yes.
previous week, the voting process for the Crunchyroll Awards. Actually, this is the fifth Crunchyroll Award. So the 2021 Crunchyroll Awards um, voting period has ended. So we are going to go through the 7 major categories. We're going to ignore things like the sound design, the voice acting, and there's one more. Oh no, those are actually the Crunchyroll Awards are actually pretty short. It's just going
Yeah.
over like things like the best anime of the year, director. They don't even talk about studios, but they go over the voice actings for lead and supporting female roles, male and female roles, as well as what stood out as the best animation of the year. So Sam, you have your picks, I have my picks, and I thought we could start at the bottom of the list and work our way up to end with the best anime of the year. So I think we can
Okay.
talk about first the best fight scene. So the current right now the category is best fight scene. For
Yes.
the nominees is Gojo versus Sakuna from Jujutsu Kaisen, Mori versus Jerga I should have looked up how to pronounce these names, but yeah, Mori versus Joga from God of High School. Actually, God of High School has 2 nominations in this category. It's
Yeah, I
also
saw that.
Mori versus Daewoo. Same thing, God of High School. We have Deku versus Overhaul from My Hero Academia. Brawler versus Master from Akudamu Drive. And I think this is Berkeley versus the Dark God Vecta from Sword Art Online Alicization War of the Underworld Part 2. So Sam, hit me with what do you think of this category? Or do these sound like good nominees of this year?
I would say it may be it may seem self-padding at first to have God of High School on there twice, but as we said before, when it was going on, the choreography and the animation was pretty much top tier in God of High School in terms of the fights. And I want to say the main character versus Daewoo. I think that was basically like 2 of the 3 main characters. That fight was really, really good, and it also had some emotional connotations for those 2 characters. I don't know about the fight with Sword Art Online, Alicization, but I have heard good things about it, so I think that was a good call. And of course, the scene from Jujutsu Kaisen is going to be on there. It's it's essentially the hook for everybody to get into the show, especially how early on that it gets that they show it. I'm trying to think. As far as my picks, I would think that Crunchyroll would pick Jujutsu mainly because of I forgot what phrase that you had said. It was a recency bias, right? Because it just happened, and it honestly would be my pick too. Because damn, it was just up there for me. What about you? What would be your picks?
All right, cool. Yeah. So I agree with the nominations. Nothing really stood out far from like best fight scenes of the year in any of the anime that I
Yeah,
watched. I think maybe because a lot of them were just low priority dramas, so there wasn't much action that I watched this year overall. So again, talking about how the nomination process works is that the Crunchyroll has maybe about 32, 35 judges, and these are all across the field. They call them leaders of industry of the anime industry, but most of them are YouTubers like Sea Dog, Connor Sea Dog, Gaunt from Giguk, um, Jeff Thu from Mother's Basement is on the board, as well as like bloggers, popular YouTubers, like I said, influencers. Not much of like industry like producers. So like if you look at
yeah.
the Oscars for the American, film awards, they have like only directors can vote for directors, only cinematographers can vote for
Uh,
cinematographers, and then
because they know what goes into because they're within that field too, so they can properly judge the work.
exactly. So the Crunchyroll Awards are basically just fan awards, which is fair. So I think
Yeah.
that's what giving your nomination like the most credit is that Mappa does do animation very well and their fight choreography, but I don't think for my personal pick, I'm going to say that Deku versus Overhaul wins in this category because
Okay.
of everything that um, that fight represents. It goes that Deku goes 100% infinite, so that's the one moment he actually surpasses All Might, or at least
Yeah.
he matches All Might in his prime. And then like the emotionality to it, having like Eerie, the girl that he's trying to rescue on her back,
Yeah.
how overpowering that Overhaul is and his ability.
Overall.
Like his ability is literally to whose ability is he remind me of? But is to destroy. Oh, it's Alphonse Elric. It's alchemy essentially,
Yeah.
and
Essentially. Yeah.
yeah, and like how overwhelming that ability is. What Overhaul did during the series, he literally like he's just a villain that does way more than All for One. Not All for One. Yeah, All for One does. He's like the villain that stands out right now of what My Hero Academia represents. He's like a character that just stands opposed to everything that the series is trying to go for. So I think a lot of the emotionality plays into that fight more than with the Sakuna fight or the Juju Kaisen fight.
Yeah.
So I think Jujutsu Kaisen wins on the technical aspect, but with the fandom that goes into My Hero Academia, I think that gives the Deku versus Overhaul fight the edge out. But God of High School gets 2 nominations. I think those cancel out each other. Brawler versus Master. That was an okay fight, but
Yeah.
nothing really stood out as perfectly needed to be nominated.
Hmm.
Same thing with the Sword Art Online fight. It was like cool. There were some abilities on display there. The cinematography was like very blasé. When there is a sword fight between like 2 overpowered characters, there's death in that fight, so there's a lot of emotionality to it. But again, who's really watching Sword Art Online anymore? After when it came back for part 2, there was a implied tentacle rape scene, like the
Oh.
series is like known for. So it's like, sure, fights can stand out, but a lot of the weight that carries on with the series is kind of like it matters. So I'm going to say
Yeah.
that my pick Overhaul, your pick, or my pick Deku versus Overhaul, your pick is Gojo versus Sakuna. All right, cool.
Hmm.
So that's kind of the low tier category. It's kind of down on the list near the best score, best character design. So right up from that, let's go into animation. Oh well, no, let's save animation for last, or with
Okay.
animation and animation
Later
and
on.
anime. Yeah. So let's go with antagonists. Who is the best antagonist of the year? So the nominees are, let's see, Akito Soma from Fruit Baskets. Is this each? Who's the villain of ReZero this year?
Oh,
Ichina,
they.
Ichina,
Well, I remember I looked at it. They said that it was one of the witches. I think
the
the
Witch of
Witch of
Greed. Is
Greed.
it Witch of
Yeah.
Greed? Yeah. All right. So the Witch of Greed from ReZero, starting life in another world. Is it N Dorohei Doro? N E
Yeah.
N
And
N. Overhaul, My Hero Academia, Rachel, Tower of God, and Sukuna from Jujutsu Kaisen. So, Sam, who is your pick for best antagonist of the year?
so I think Crunchyroll will pick Overhaul because of how popular My Hero Academia is, and from what you said earlier, Overhaul is a really good villain. I think that he was a great villain to pick up things after One for All, mainly because of like his organization, his themes, and his drives that drove him to do what he needed to do. However, I also think that Rachel from Tower of God is a pretty good antagonist. So I would sort of lean towards Rachel mainly because she's more subtle and she works behind the scenes to get to what she needed. And that's sort of what makes me that's the one thing that I like to hate her about because she's not upfront with everybody. She's willing to do anything that she wants to get what she wants and even to hide her true intentions. And seeing them put the Witch of Greed as an antagonist, it makes me want to rewatch Ray Zero because now that I think about it, it's like when I first watched it, it's like, did I really understand what was going on? Because she was trying to be friendly and it seemed like she was trying to get him to have a pact with her. Basically, it seemed like she was putting him in a Frollo and Quasimodo situation in the sense of you need my help, you don't know what you're doing, and trying to make him dependent on her, that sort of thing. Now that I think about it, and so I would say that that was probably a good pick, but I would have to rewatch it to see to really understand because it made me realize that I might have missed what really happened.
Yeah, so I think we're actually perfectly aligned with this. Is that I do think
Yeah.
Overhaul is going to win. Again, everything I mentioned with his fight against Deku. And I would want Rachel to win because, oh my gosh, sorry, I'm just thinking about how good Tower of God is, but also the
Yes.
villain aspect of how Rachel plays out her scheme in the show is that, again, a lot of what comes down to the antagonist is that there is an likability. There is a likability to the antagonist of the series. So same
Yeah.
thing with Overhaul. You get his character. He has a unique quirk, not actually a quirk power, but a quirk as in he finds things filthy and that he's like
Yeah,
he
he's
wears.
OCD.
Yeah, OCD. Thank you. Yeah, that's the word. Yeah, he's OCD about things and he just hates. But that OCDness comes out through his philosophy about people with people with superpowers. Do people in My Hero Academia have a name for Yeah, quirk.
Yeah, they just call them quirks, and they it's easier for them to have a name for people who don't have quirks because there's so few of them, so they just call them quirkless.
Right. Okay. Yeah. So people that just have powers, that's the natural order of things. And then people
Yeah,
that don't have powers are just quirkless. But anyways, yeah. But yeah, Rachel's thing is that she doesn't fall into that likability, but everything that belies her villainous is that she doesn't stand out. So when she does turn that twist and becoming the antagonist of the first season, is that it's so unexpected, but when they go
yeah,
back for a 13th episode and they explain everything, how she was using subterfuge to just insert herself into the story beats, is that it's just
yeah.
masterfully done. So if I want her to win, but I'm pretty sure Overhaul is going to win by that Crunchyroll votes. And of course,
Mhm.
the weight of voting for the Crunchyroll Awards is 70-30. So the so-called experts have 70% voting power, while everyone that voted in has 30%.
It has
So
30%.
it has been seen in the past that 30% can tilt a vote in the opposite direction. So hopefully, even though people didn't really care for Tower of God, at least hopefully people will
They
notice
watched
that.
enough to understand. Yeah.
Yeah, hopefully they notice that Rachel is worthy to take the winner spot here. So from antagonist we go into the pro tag of
Yes.
the hero of the story, or where the story is focused. So for the nominees are Anos Voldio from Misfit of the Demon King Academy, uh, Christina from My Next Life as a Villainess, All Routes Lead to Doom, Midori from Keep Your Hands Off Ezuken, Natsumi from Decadence. Decadence finally gets some recognition here.
I know,
Shoyo
right?
Hinata from High Q to the Top, and Yuji Itadori from Jujutsu Kaisen. So, Sam, who's your pick for a winner of Best Protagonist of the Year?
I think that Crunchy is going to pick Shoyo because of how popular Haiku is, and this is basically, is this the last season or is the second to last season for
Yeah,
Haiku that
it's
went on?
basically the next to last season, and
Yeah.
Shoyo deserves to win.
Let me finish and then we can get to yours.
Whatever.
But I want to say, for my personal pick, if they had chosen the boss from Decadence instead of Natsumi, I would have chosen him because I felt for me the boss in Decadence was more of the protagonist than Natsumi was. Natsumi, she's a good and strong character in her own right, but the story I felt as though like it followed him. I mean, it opened up with her, but as you kept going, it was more about like his journey and his acceptance of society and the world that things are, and his relation with her is what made him change to do what he does. In that regard. Uh,
Gotcha.
but with my personal because the boss from Decadence wasn't on there, I'm just gonna stick with Yuji, mainly because what we've seen with him, he's quirky like some of the other shonen protagonists, but he has a sense of maturity about him. For instance, there was one episode 3 episodes ago where he was about to go off on a friend of his because his friend was with the bad guys, and then mid-fight, his friend mentioned how he lost his mother, and he just stopped the fight, and he's like, "Yo, something happened with your mom? Tell me about it. What happened?" It was more. He was very mature in that aspect, so it would just be interesting seeing him take the protagonist
Yeah.
lead because of his maturity in that sense.
Yeah. Sorry. I was thinking of my
Yeah,
best boy. I was thinking of my
I know.
best boy nomination. So, best boy, well, we'll talk about that in a little bit. But yeah, I
Yeah,
completely agree with your pick of Yuji Itadori, is that he should win, and I think he will win. Is that the story is just so focused for Jujutsu Kaisen on him, and his path to becoming a sorcerer supreme. But
yes.
but yeah, he's so but he's likable in the way of like not most shonen protagonists. Like he is quirky, but also he has a deep flaw to his character, and it comes from his grandfather dying in the first episode. Is that what is his main driving force? And that comes from a sense of responsibility for other people, and like that
Yeah.
is like kind of what defines shonen protagonists, that sense of self-sacrifice. But most shonen protagonists kind of have this like power friendship, or some kind of like uh,
Itadori.
Itadori does have this. I don't know. It feels like he just feels more mature, even though he's a high school student and most shonens are set
Yeah.
in high school. But he has this real sense of attachment to how people actually think in the world. So, like, there's this businessman sorcerer that kind of rolls out and kind of diagnoses Yuji as like a self-sacrificing person, and like, but he kind of breaks it down in a psychological way, and it just makes you feel more for Yuji, and like what you said with his friend and what happens with him. Like, you kind of get like a lot of dread from his character, and I think that kind of
Yeah.
motivates his actions in a very real way to make sure that he's best protagonist for the year. All right, so moving on to best girl, best boy, and best girl. But for the best
All right.
girl, we have the nominees of Abigail Jones from Great Pretender, Katharina from My Next Life as a Villainess, All Routes Lead to Doom, Chizuru from Rent a Girlfriend, Kaguya from Kaguya-sama, Love is War,
Noi.
Noi
Noi.
from Dorohei Doro, and Sayaka from Keep Your Hands Off Ezukin. So Sam, who's your nominee and winner, or who do you think is going to win out for best girl?
So I think Kaguya is gonna win for the crunchy pick, mainly because I've been watching a little bit of Kaguya-sama, thanks to you and a mutual friend of ours, and I can see why the show has so much love for it, and I can see her basically getting the pick because of how popular the show is, and with the way that this character acts, it's sort of like in a cute way, and people can just gravitate towards her. But for me, my pick would be Noi from Doro Hidoro, because I've told you that I have watched Doro Hidoro, and Noi, she is essentially one of those A1 day one girls, those ride or die chicks, right? Whereas she's the type where you can call her up. It's like, hey, I have a body. I don't know what to do. And she'll come to your apartment with a shovel and a plastic bag. And it's like, this is what we're going to do. And, just very, very supportive. And she does it in a comedic way. And it's just funny because when you first introduced her, she wears a mask and she's just this towering, huge muscle of a person, right? And you can tell that like she's warm hearted and stuff like that. And you don't realize that she's a girl until later on where she takes the mask off. And so like that nice personality comes off as warm as you get to know her a little bit more. But she's not afraid to get her hands dirty or to bust some heads. So that's why she's my pick for best girl.
Got you. Yeah, and not normally I would say that. Well, my pick for winner would be Kaguya-sama for everything that you said, but
Yeah.
also that what of the Crunchyroll voting body is that I think the Rent a Girlfriend just has so many top tier waifus, and again, it's a situation of best girl and best boy have this kind of nebulous kind of feel for what actually constitute like a winner for the category, because it's very
Yeah.
personal, while best protagonist and best antagonist, it kind of has a concrete,
It's a bit more
literary.
objectional.
Right, exactly.
Yeah, objective, a bit more
Yeah,
objective.
yeah, same thing with like best animation. If people actually know what good animation is, it doesn't matter if it looks good to you. Animation by itself is a artistic expression, so if you don't actually know what good animation looks like, then you can't really judge it. But with best girl,
Yeah.
I think Chizuru just fills in with so many of what the voting body sees as what best quote best girl is. Again, that comes down personality. It comes to stating how strong the character has with the relationship they have with the main male character, and like their dynamic. If it's an odd couple, if they feel like soulmates. So best girl maybe does have something to do with their individual personality, like you said with Noi, is that even if she does have a mask over her and like her personality bleeds through, I think it does has to do with the dynamics of best girl and their counterpart in the story. So I think Chizuru just plays off of the other character in the series a little bit better than most of like Kaguya-sama with the principal, or not principal, but the president in this.
The president.
Yeah.
No, I agree with what you're saying. I'm glad that you brought it up. Whereas with Best Girl and the Best Boy, it's more of like a product of our time, like what people are attracted to right now. For instance, like in JoJo's Bizarre Adventure, where in the beginning, the men, the way that they are drawn, are huge and beefy and super bodybuilders, right? Whereas more in like season 4 and season 5, they're all slim and toned to sort of reflect the attractiveness or what people are attracted to now, in that sort of regard. So I'm glad that you did bring that up.
Yeah, exactly. And that leaves us into Best Boy, which for the nominees are for Best Boy are Anos, I keep saying his name wrong, where Anos Valdio from The Misfit of the Demon King Academy, Cayman?
Oh
Like
yeah,
a fish?
Cayman. Yeah,
Like a fish?
like the
Oh no, like the
lizard.
alligator. Oh
Yeah.
yeah, caiman. Yeah, crocodile, alligator.
Mm-hmm.
From Dorohedoro, Kun Agero, Agnes from Tower of God, or Kun, Legoshi from Beastars, Gojo from Jujutsu Kaisen, and Shoyo Hinata from Haikyuu to the Top. So Sam, what is your winner for Best Boy?
I think Crunchy's going to pick Shoyo, and my pick would just be Gojo, in the sense of Gojo, he's very reminiscent of Kakashi, but he is a bit. But he's reminiscent of Kakashi, but he's a little bit more lackadaisical in how he talks to other people. So he comes off as immature, basically because he can be, because of how powerful he is. Just like it just shows how comfortable he is, but he's also somewhat respectful of how afraid they are of him. So, just the way he acts, it comes off as genuine and not belittling.
Okay, got you. Yeah, so I would say I want Shoyo to win,
Yeah.
but given how Haikyuu was for this season, is that it was mostly focused on other characters, is that he didn't really stand out. There's like a best boy moment for him in the season, but again,
Yeah.
like how strong does that compare to all the other nominees for their best boy moment? Gojo is an old man, so I don't know if he really like he wouldn't fall into any other category, but I think the Gojo nomination here is the one that's just out of place. Same thing with Anos Valdio. He's like a 20-year
But
old.
they can be everybody's zaddies out there. They can be the zaddy of the bunch.
I mean, sure, if they want to create a new category, but so those two are kind of like, and also came in as a giant lizard man, so I'm not sure either with.
I would say like what you said with Gojo and the Demon King dude, with them being as old as they are, Cayman sort of goes into that bunch too. Because he's older and he's not necessarily good boy either. Good boy, best boy material.
Yeah, and I think a lot with best boy and best girl does come down to their cute value. So we're talking about like a dominating qualification for this category. I think Legoshi takes it, given how
Oh, okay.
Stars was received earlier this year. And again, talking about recency bias, is that season 2 is scheduled to come out, or is premiering now, or also should be premiering
Yeah.
pretty soon. So, given that it's probably on a lot of people's mind and how hard Beastars hit earlier this year, that Legoshi did have a lot of cute moments, even though he's a wolf, and he still falls into a category of high school student, and he does have a cute moment because he has a lot of like
It's easier for him to have cute moments because he is a wolf. He has ears that move and he has a tail that can move. So he can do more subtle things that humans can't to show cuteness.
that, and also he's just a giant nerd. I mean, he's a theater nerd, so it's like a lot of
Yeah.
adorable things. I mean, he's going through high school and he's getting into his first physical relationship with a student during the course of this season, and him being a nerd and like kind of dealing with like the human aspect of dealing with people is like also cute. So I think
Yeah.
that the Crunchyroll board is going to give it to Legoshi for
Okay.
Best Boy. All right, moving into one of our last categories is Best Animation. So, Best Animation are the nominees of, where are they? I think I scrolled past them in my notes. Best
No.
Animation. Oh yes, Best Animation. So nominees are Beastars, Great Pretender, Jujutsu Kaisen, Keep Your Heads Off Ezukin, Princess Connect Redive, and God of High School. And just a brief caveat to talk about here, because the Crunchyroll Awards are being presented by the sponsor of Princess Connect Redive. So they got a nomination and they're also sponsoring the award ceremony. So talking
They have to
about,
feel better. They have to feel good about
well,
themselves.
that, but also it's the kind of situation of the Game Awards that happened very recently. So like the Game Awards is like this big industry showcase, but it's all basically filled with corporate sponsored individuals. So it's like
Yeah.
you kind of predict, you can pretty much guarantee know who's going to win the video game awards each year because of that fact. And
Because
like,
who's sponsoring them?
exactly. So like they're paying for their votes just to say, "Oh yeah, we won an award that we gave ourselves," essentially. I mean, even with Last of Us Part 2, which was critically panned across the board, still won Game of the Year
What?
this year. Yeah, I don't
Lame.
know if you heard all the hype about that, but no one loved Last of Us Part 2. But
Yeah, nobody liked it.
yeah, so same thing here. If Princess Connect wins, even though I haven't watched it, I would not be surprised. But I think a lot of people will be up in arms given the other nominees in this category. But Sam, who do you think had the best animation for this year?
It's a three-way tie for me because I like Jujutsu Kaisen, even though it came out late. It's so pretty. It's great. God of High School, as we said earlier, the technical aspects with the choreography, with the fights, and the animation there. The animation might have dropped a little bit comparison to Jujutsu Kaisen, but it was still there. And I would say like Great Pretender had really good animation as well. And when I was looking at the list, I had saw that. So it's sort of like a tie. I'm leaning towards Jujutsu Kaisen, but a lot of, like you said, the contenders for that section, they are very strong. Like for instance, Beastars probably gives me hope for what CGI animation could be.
Oh, okay. So sorry. What was your pick was what? Jujutsu Kaisen?
My as I said, I'm tie between Jujutsu Kaisen, God of High School, and Great Pretender, but I'm just going to say Jujutsu Kaisen.
All right, cool. Yeah.
I'm going to keep my theme running.
Okay, cool. Yeah, I mean, it's fair because I mean, if you're looking at like the rundown for the nominations, is that Great Pretender, Jujutsu Kaisen, and Keep Your Hands Off Ezukin all got 10 nominations, followed
Yeah,
up with Beastars at 8 and Tower of God at 7. So like, it's definitely warranted that everyone is in love with Jujutsu Kaisen. But of the ones that I'm thinking is just a hands down win, if it doesn't win Anime of the Year, is that Keep Your Hands Off Ezukin. So I put this
yeah,
pretty high or low, depending. Like it was on my lower moons for animes of the years. But talking about how animation works in the industry, that Masaki Yuasa, again, he's the dude that did Devilman Crybaby recently, and that won
yeah.
2 years ago. So I'm thinking that if Ezukin is like one of is considered one of his beautifulest, most beautiful works,
Yes.
is that I think the body's just going to recognize that Ezukin is just off the charts beautiful, and it's really hard to compete with that. Like Jujutsu Kaisen is like one of those things of it's the best that Studio Mappa has done, but if you look at Studio Mappa's history, I'm sure that it's going to get better, while
Yeah.
Keep Your Hands Off Ezukin is like the peak of a great animator director. So I think this is going to be like, if you're looking at what awards do, like they are a timepiece, and that
Yeah.
what Ezukin did, be it with not, it didn't pioneer anything, but it's like one of those things of excellence that you can't really ignore. While Jujutsu Kaisen is just like, oh yeah, it's beautiful for Studio Mappa, but Studio Mappa does beautiful works. So I think it's a little bit different for like,
Okay.
if it's going to be a timepiece that we might forget about Jujutsu Kaisen, because like right now with the manga still going on, that it might go up from here. And I think that's probably what's going to weigh heavily on people's minds or voters' minds, is that it's going to get better from here. So why give it to it now when it might get disqualified later on because of its, early nomination and win? So I'm going to say that the body's going to give it to Ezuken over Jujutsu Kaisen and Great Pretender, which are the ones that I think compete with it. All right, so final category, the one that everyone wants to know our opinions of, is what does Crunchyroll's going to be for their best anime of the year? So the nominees are Sam, can you help me with this one again? What's your Wacky Racer anime called?
Oh, Apari Ramen.
Yes, thank you. That's the nominee. Then it comes with Beastars, Dorohei Doro, Great Pretender, Jujutsu Kaisen, and Keep Your Hands Off Ezuken. So, Sam, who are you giving Anime of the Year to?
I would have to say and you had mentioned this before we had started. I want to appreciate Crunchyroll for giving Apari Ramen and Dorohei Doro at least like some spotlight, because it seems like they were going to fly under the radar this year. They were good and fun romps, but not enough to win Anime of the Year. I would say, I think Crunchy would pick Jujutsu because of recency bias, but all of what you said about Keep Your Hands Off of Azukin, how it's more of a how it's essentially just like you can look at it and you're like, this is something, like this is a hallmark staple. Whereas Jujutsu Kaisen, it's a trend of a studio going upward and not necessarily that defining of an anime. So for Anime of the Year, I would go with Keep Your Hands Off of Azukin.
Cool. Yeah, I mean, that makes sense. I mean, we talked about this earlier, that the New York Times best list listed it as one of the best TV shows of the year. So, I mean, I think that also comes into play when you think about how awards want to be like other awards. Same thing, like if you look at the Golden Globes, they are always trying to stand like, we're the Golden Globes, we're not the Oscars kind of situation. So I think that's going to be the motivating factor here. So I think that Crunchyroll is actually going to give it to Beastars for that reason over Ezukin. So I want Ezukin to win, but I think it's going to be one of those they don't want to seem populist, and that the impact that Beastars had on the community this year, like people are still talking about it. And again, talking about recency bias, is that the drama that was going on in Beastars is so intense, how it goes about addressing things that, are pervasive in our own real world political system. I mean, they talk about segregation, they talk about they're animals, but they talk about like acts of dehumanizing people and what do all these isms do to separate people, but wrapping that all up into this kind of allegory about growing up and growing to deal with those, but also talking about like animalistic violence inside of teenagers, and like how they grow up to be violent and how they have to deal with those predilections or proclivities to be violent. So it's a lot that goes into Beastars. I think that a lot of people are not talking about it because it's a really hard show to watch. There is a suggested there's a sexual assault in it. There's a lot of sexual content in it, and I think that's going to go over a lot of people's head when you say like, oh, what's the best anime of the year? It's something that is digestible, enjoyable to everyone. So Ezukin kind of falls into that category more so. But if we're trying to be
different,
to be different, contrarian about it, is like, I think Beastars gets the nod above Ezukin. And Jujutsu Kaisen kind of has that same problem, is that it's not finished yet, so I don't know why it kind of got the anime of the year when it's only 13, or what just premiered, episode 15.
It's halfway through its first season, I think.
Right, yeah. So
first season got 26 episodes, or no?
Exactly, yeah. So it's first core wrap, but to weigh that against all these other anime in a fair competition, that's not really fair. So I think Jujutsu Kaisen just gets wiped out. Dorohei Doro didn't really get talked about significantly enough to warrant that as well. And Great Pretender had its situation with Netflix and its delayed release. So I think a lot of that is going to affect at least the voter. Well, it's not going to affect the 70%, but I think it is going to affect the 30% for the the mail-in voting. So yeah. All right.
Mail-in
So
voting.
yeah, so that's the that's the Crunchyroll Awards. So the other categories that we just skipped out on, just because not to talk about score, how the musicality works for and how it plays into a series. So best director we actually skipped out on, best character design, best couple, who cares about love, best voice
Exactly.
acting, Japanese and English, best opening or OP, and best ending or ED, best fantasy, best drama, and best comedy. So we did skip out on a lot of the categories, but we did talk about the nominees, that 10 of them happened for A Great Pretender, Jujutsu Kaisen, Keep Your Hands Off Ezuken. 8 of them went to Beastars, 7 went to Tower of God, and 6 went to Dorohedoro. So I think Dorohedoro does have a leg in the race for some of these categories. But the Crunchyroll Awards will premiere on Crunchyroll to be streamed on February 19th at 10 p.m. Pacific Coast time. And this is the 5th year. So it's a big year for things to happen. We'll maybe come back to the Crunchyroll Awards when it's 10 years old. But now, Sam, any final thoughts? How you feeling about the Crunchyrolls? Will you be tuning in?
I'm gonna try, and what you said about Beastars, it sort of reminds me of Dorohedoro, because Dorohedoro, it just dwells in the violence and the gore. So I would be surprised if it wins Anime of the Year or something as popular to make more people watch it because of how violent it is. But I would say it was just interesting to me how diverse some of the picks were, and I would be interested to see what they actually choose for the awards.
Yeah, that's fair. Yeah. So, I mean, I've never turned into the Crunchyroll Awards before, but I think this year, because I actually feel like I'm
Participating.
yeah, I'm invested in it now, because it's like, yeah, we're actually talking about it. And like the Crunchyroll Awards have always been like a fan driven experience. So it's
Yeah.
always placated to like the populist vote, but there's always these surprised winners, like, oh, well, of
The
course,
dark horse or
yeah, the
something.
dark horse wins, and it's like being contrarian. But like past winners were like Made in the Abyss, Devilman Crybaby, like Carol on Tuesday. So like there is recognition. Like fans do kind of have a Megalobox. Also, I think won a lot of
Oh,
awards as
they did?
well.
Okay.
So yeah,
So
well,
they
they
do
got a
have
lot of
some taste
nominations
over
at
there.
least. Yeah, like they do. Yeah, they do have some taste. But then there's like years like, oh yeah, My Hero Academia got 10, when the next was like um, Land of the Illustrious got 6. It's like, okay, well, that's not true. But anyways, yeah. But I mean, awards are always like up in the air. Depends on who's voting, who's sponsoring, who's voting, and like even with like what are people actually watching. So
Yeah.
we had a very long list of anime that we thought was best this year that got no love at all. So like Interspecies Reviewer was like my number one, and we both had
Yeah.
like Millionaire Billionaire Detective on our both of our lists. So like
That
animes,
wasn't
they're just,
mentioned.
again, like there's so many anime that happen. It's really hard to narrow down an award ceremony to be actually representative of what actually happened in a year. But anyways, that is our Crunchyroll talk. So Sam, let's move on into talking about this 2010 anime Wolverine, which I picked. It was my choice, and I'm so sorry again that we are going through all of the Marvel anime series. So we already covered last year Iron Man. This year is, first up was Wolverine,
Was
followed
Wolverine.
up by X-Men, and then Blade. So
Yes.
talking about Wolverine right now, this was a premiere back on January 7th, 2011 for a 12 episode run. And like the other threes, this is by Studio Madhouse
Oh,
Productions.
Madhouse
And
did this? No.
yeah, they're all Studio Madhouse productions. And again, this is in collaboration with Marvel Entertainment. And again, that this is a story that follows Logan, aka Wolverine, who travels to Tokyo. Look at that. We're back in Japan for this anime.
Hey, how about that?
Yeah, how about that? The coincidence to find his missing girlfriend, who was taken by a crime syndicate headed by her father, is in the rating of PG-13, which is a disservice to Wolverine, like we saw with most of the X-Men movies until Logan. And then this is a genre of action and martial arts. So, Sam, I'm more familiar with comic books than I think maybe you are. Is that true? Do you know much about the X-Men comic books?
I would say I read a good amount of X-Men growing up. I didn't read the comic books that focused on Wolverine primarily. What I read a little bit of the origin for Wolverine when he came out. No, when I'm trying to remember which one it came out. It was like Origin 2. It was a big thing. I read a little bit on when he recently died. I didn't read how he came back though. But I have read a lot, a good number of X Men, but I haven't really read any of the Wolverine focused stories. But I feel like I have a good understanding of his character, and I would say, well, before I go on to this, because like, what's your exposure to Wolverine in the comics? Did you read a lot of his backstory, or did you just mainly focus on the X Men comics?
Yeah, so I was just bringing up that fact because I'm I'm somewhat more. I'm not somewhat more, but I'm familiar with the X-Men stories more than Wolverine. So I was very interested to
Yeah.
revisit this one more so than X-Men because this is based off a Chris Claremont series back in 1970, I believe. But it's like the first Wolverine solo standalone comic, and that I went back to
Okay.
read this because I'm more invested in the stories that get adapted into movies.
Yeah.
So this storyline follows basically the same story beats of the 2013 live action movie for Wolverine.
That's what I was about to say. I saw a lot of parallels, but what was your opinion? Did you prefer the 2013 live action adaptation of Wolverine, or did you prefer the anime?
So only watching the first three episodes is really hard to tell. So I might have to come back for a more, fully fleshed out opinion about that. But I really enjoyed the 2013 version of the story, directed by James Mangold, and that the Wolverine had so much. What can you really say about that movie? Is that, well, for one, it was like the sixth installment to the X
Yeah.
Men franchise, and it was connecting like the Last Stand to Days of Future Past. So Wolverine was dealing with, spoiler alerts, the death of Jean Grey in that movie,
Yeah.
and that is kind of like the forced aspect to come to make sure that it mashes together to the Fox timeline for all the X-Men movies. So I really enjoyed that this version was more closely aligned with that volume one of the Chris Claremont series. And of course, that was, well, not of course, but that was also penciled by Frank Miller, that most people know from Sin City. So
Yeah.
I very much enjoyed. Oh, well, I went back to read the comic book. That's why I'm talking about it like that. Is that these are such loose adaptations? Is that it's kind of somewhat, well, it's not insulting. I wouldn't say insulting, but
Yeah.
it's like so loosely based. It's like they take the idea. There's his girlfriend Mirako, and then he goes to Japan, and that's kind of it because the 2013
Exactly.
version introduces the Silver Samurai, which is somewhat of a new
It's a
creation to the
it,
X-Men
it,
lore.
is it? Because I heard about it. It seemed like he had a history with the Silver Samurai in the comic.
Yeah, so the Silver Samurai, like another character in this series, like his name is, or Mirika's father, Shingen, is the Silver Samurai, but he didn't get all of those technological advancements or the suit until a later edition. So they're both the same character, but also not. So not to delve too much into like the history of that character, but it's just like a mismatch of things. And the 2013 version kind of complicates that further. So it's very
Yeah.
hard to see the influence of the comic book series into the adaptation. So talking about how well it actually adapts the property or at least the source material is really hard to say. So I just wanted to bring that up if people are saying, "Oh my gosh, my favorite Wolverine comic book got adapted." No, it didn't. So I wanted to say that. Um,
Don't trick yourself. Don't lie to yourself. That did not happen.
yeah. So just talking more about the animation, actually talking about the series. This is
Yeah.
a step up from Iron Man, but it's
Is
still
it though? Is it? Is
No,
it really?
well, just talking about the 3 episodes is that
Okay.
Wolverine in this series does have a unique design because it's not very Wolverine-esque. Like we've seen Wolverine in a lot of other incarnations throughout the years, like Wolverine the X-Men, X-Men Evolution, and there's kind of this standard feel for what Wolverine looks like, but this Wolverine is like it's the youngest we've ever seen him. He has a weird leather jacket. His hair isn't spiked. His mutton chops don't go far down his face. They kind of stop at his cheekbones, and it's just an odd look to him. He doesn't have spiked hair. He's like he has a slender build to him. Like Wolverine is like a really bulky dude. He's towering
Yeah.
over people. Well, this version of Wolverine's towering over people. So even if you're looking at it from a character design standpoint, it's very mismatched to what we expect Wolverine to look like. So even on that basis, it's like odd.
What were your thoughts on that? Like, were you able to stomach it? I'm sorry, not I didn't mean to. Let me rephrase. I didn't mean to hit you with a leading question.
Mm.
What was your opinion on the new design for Wolverine when you were watching this anime?
Well, it's off-putting. Is that it's not what Wolverine should look like. Like you're looking at
I
fidelity.
wanted you to say it, not me.
Oh, okay. So it's not a thing of expectation of fidelity. Is that how does it translate? Or like again, like a lot of the problem with Iron Man was that that's not an Iron Man story,
Yeah,
but this is an Wolverine story. That's why I kind of give it a mark above Iron Man because yes, Wolverine has this relationship with like the Japanese Yakuza. It's set inside of an actual story where the previous Iron Man story was just kind of cobbled together between what Warren Ellis kind of thought up on the spot and a story that he
yeah.
suggested. But this is actually adapted from a known storyline. So there's also the element of did you watch the dub or did you watch the Japanese?
I watched the dub. I was gonna try to go back and watch the Japanese, but I hadn't had a chance to. What about you? Did you watch the dub or the sub?
Yeah, so I watched the dub too, and that's what I wanted to comment
Okay.
on about with his character as well. Is that uh, Steve Bloom usually is the voice of Wolverine. Like he voices him in the other animated versions of X Men. He voices him in the video games, and the
That's
dude
weird because
in
Steve was
this.
another character.
Yeah,
Like,
he voices someone else in this anime,
yeah,
but he doesn't
but he doesn't
voice
voice Wolverine.
he doesn't voice
What?
Wolverine. So I was like, already from the character design to the voice, they're all off.
They're like, Steve, what happened? Did you call out sick that day for the casting call? What was going on?
Right. Maybe he couldn't dedicate his time. Maybe he was busy. Maybe he had conflictions with another voice acting
Maybe.
performance that he was doing. But yeah, just okay. Now let's actually talk about yeah. So going off of all that, like
Instead of being around the bush, I just want to talk a little bit about the character design because as you said, like most often, like with Wolverine, he's a shorter, bulkier dude, right? And there's nothing wrong with us seeing him as a younger version. They did that with Wolverine in the Ultimate Universe. They even made him blonde, right? But the thing is, like, they had de-aged him, right? So it made sense why he looked the way that he looked because he wasn't the Wolverine that we knew. But the thing is, it was so weird because they were still doing the even though he was supposed to be younger, we don't know how old he is,
mm,
right? So he could still have that he still has that healing factor, but we don't know just like how many hundreds of years he's been around. He could have just had like pretty vampire syndrome, right, where he's just
mhm,
tall and slender. But like the thing is, like with Wolverine's character, he's not taller than everybody else. He doesn't tower over people, even though Hugh Jackman is 6'3". The way that they shot the movies, they made him seem the same height or shorter than everybody else, right? That's just part of his character, and also like how he acts and how he moves a little bit. I know I'm getting a little bit too purist on that aspect, but it was just it seems like they said that like they gave us a Wolverine character and giving a quote unquote Wolverine story, but it's not. Even though it's like a step up from Iron Man, where it's something that he would do. It's not necessary. It still feels a bit hollow and not enough heart in the adaptation.
Yeah, and I think that's literally the main issue of this. So it is a understandable goal that he sets that, oh, I need to save my girl. So it's a very much a save the cat problem. Like they don't fridge her, they don't kill her to
Yeah,
motivate him. They do kill his best friend or at least an
which
associate
is
of
weird
his.
because like that was the one thing, and I have to go back and rewatch the original X-Men movies, right, to see why Wolverine started liking Jean Grey. But at least in 2013, the Wolverine, right, there was a progression on why he started having romantic feelings for the girl that he was protecting, right? Whereas in this film, it's just, you know, we don't really have any backstory on like how he met Mariko, like why he likes her, right? And she knows that he's a mutant. She knows that he has a healing factor, and she knows that she has ties to the Yakuza. So it's just weird how she's always acting surprised when people are shooting at him and he walks away from it. It's like this isn't the first time that you've seen this. And there's also no backstory on how he knows his friend. It's just like, oh, is this some random guy that I know? He just happens to work for the Japanese government, right?
Right,
And
yeah. So like the emotional core of the series is kind of missing if you're saying like what is the
yeah,
giant problem of like
exactly.
why does it
Why
matter
should I
to
care?
me as a viewer
Yeah,
that Wolverine is going through all this carnage and mayhem, which is completely fine, but there was no setup for their relationship. Even the introductory scene to them, they like have two lines of dialogue with each other, and then it goes, "Oh yeah, now it's a year later." And like my girlfriend's missing. I have to go to Japan. And like he
and
loses in a duel in the first episode. So it's like it does have a faster pace than Iron Man. So that's
yeah,
again a plus in the category because Iron Man was so mind numbingly slow as it was rolling out its action. But
hmm
there is a scene of action basically in every episode. So to say that what Wolverine does well is that it's fast paced or it's at least enjoyable ride. So I do think it does pass the 3 episode test because at the end of episode 3 they introduce
yeah.
another main X-Men antagonist, Omega Red. So I'm like, oh my
Oh,
gosh,
don't
the
get me
hype.
started. Don't get me started.
Yeah.
How are they going to change Wolverine design, but they keep Omega Red's design? Like, he looks more traditional than the main character. So you
Right.
know who he is. Like, if you had a picture and a still and like no words, like no context, you would just think that Omega Red is just like beating up some random dude that just like walked out of a Hot Topic store.
Right.
Like,
Yeah. If Wolverine doesn't pop his claws, you don't really know.
yeah,
He
you
is,
don't know who he is.
yeah, he is generic anime hot guy, essentially. And he even has the voice of anime hot guy because I can't pronounce his name, but I know the voice actor. He's the father in Just Us. Is it or Us? The TV show got very popular.
Oh, you're talking about the guy that was in Heroes.
Oh yeah, yeah,
He
Peter
has,
Capaldi,
yeah,
or his brother, whatever. But yeah, his name's Milo. I always forget how to pronounce his last name just
Milo.
because it's super Italian. But anyways, yeah. So of the problems of the anime here is that one, there's no emotional core. There is also the problem of the violence. Again, like we see Wolverine cut down a bunch of aim fools in the beginning or aim grunts in the
Uh,
beginning, and you like see him
I forgot about
puncture
AIM.
them, but you just see their,
Yeah.
blood spot. And it's like they do delve into combat enough. I mean, it does have the genre tag of martial arts, but like the martial arts not really on showcase. It's not really the highlight. The choreography, the action is pretty generic. Same thing with like the musicality to the show. It's like it leans into heavy rock and roll, but also it's like nothing stands out. Like the score doesn't stand out. So
Yeah.
the things that mark it above Iron Man, I think, is one Yukio. She's the Black Widow
Oh,
kind of stand-in.
so with Yukio, she is that's the character's real name for Lady Deathstrike. So they were setting her up for that, and that was kind of interesting. But even then, it was interesting seeing her with Wolverine, but it still felt a bit forced with their interactions, right?
Mhm. Oh,
And
interesting. Because I love their
yeah,
interactions. Because I thought that was like the highlight of the. You see, I love the
no, like
discrepancy. That is
it
that
was
it's
good.
odd couple. Is like they're the odd couple. Is that they're it's like that begrudging allies relationships that you see in like
Yeah,
cop shows, or most they have like playful dialogue, or at least it has some kind of combativeness to it, and that she does feel enough well-rounded to serve as a supporting character. She has like a Black Widow. I call it a Black Widow vibe because she has like a deep V that reveals her anime titties, and short hair. She has a bad ass moments in the
she
first
has
episodes.
a spy onesie.
Yeah, the spy onesie. Thank you. Yeah, and she does get somewhat undersold as a badass, but she does have like badass moments. But it's not like she isn't an equal to Wolverine, which is kind of a letdown. But you know, if they're not really focusing on that relationship too much, or if they were trying to set up something like, oh yeah, this
Yeah.
is where in the follow up season 2 to Wolverine, we're going to have Lady Deathstrike.
Yeah,
But
this is where she gets her claws and things like that.
yeah, but again, like the tick above Iron Man, I would watch this over an Iron Man, but like that's such a small margin of better. So for me, I
Just
would say
yeah.
that 3 episodes, I would say I would expect the rest of the series because of the introduction of Omega Red, and that if he's kind of like the main force antagonist until we get to like the final episodes of Silver Samurai dude, that I'm invested. So how you think, Sam? Where are you on the expect versus suspect scale?
I would say it's just it has me it's a little bit better like you said, and they do things that are a little bit different. Like at the end of each episode they have a different outro than Iron Man had, where it's like they have a still and then they have Wolverine's claws go through, and just different stills of the action to try to build up tension. I want to say that's reminiscent of some of the earlier TV shows whenever they're trying to do that. So that was kind of cool. But if the content felt like it knew what it was doing better, then I would be expectant. But as we said before, like the character design for Wolverine was different. The character design for the people who worked at AIM was different in the comic books, and I want to say even in Deadpool's TV show. I'm sorry, not TV show, but even in Deadpool's movie, the people who worked at AIM, they're in yellow hazmat suits. That's how you know that they worked with AIM, right? But they had their own costumes and things like that. And then you have people like Omega Red. They come out and they look just like what they were. You have this clash where you don't know if they're trying to do their own thing or if they're trying to be if they're trying to honor the source material, you know. So I would say I'm just a little bit sus, mainly because like with the fights, even with the fight with the Yakuza guy and the fight with Steve Bloom's character with the samurai, uh, because Wolverine he's a very proficient fighter and he can hold his own. But when he was fighting those guys with the sword, he didn't look like he knew what he was doing, and I felt like I was cheated as a Wolverine fan because Wolverine knows how to handle the sword. He has training. He knows what he's supposed to do, but then again, the show never really gave us precedence to. It's like, okay, if it is a younger Wolverine, or at least like let us know. It's like, hey, he'd never been to Japan before. He's never had proper sword training, but we're sort of just like thrown in there, right? So I'm just supposed to. I don't know what I'm supposed to expect from this character, is what I'm saying, and I'm a little mad at that. So I guess like that's what's making me suspect later on, because I feel as though he's going to go into a situation where I feel as though because he's the Wolverine that I know, he should be able to handle it properly, but because they don't describe it or explain it on their end, he's going to feel horribly, and I'm going to be mad because I was never told to not expect Wolverine things from Wolverine.
Yeah, that's completely how I feel as well. So we're going to rank all the Marvel animes after we finish Blade in the fall.
Yeah.
So right now, are you saying that this is above Iron Man or below Iron Man for you?
I agree with you in the sense that it's just above Iron Man, but just enough. Like
Marginally better, marginally
just marginally, yeah.
marginally enjoyable. Yeah, that's fair. All right, so that wraps up our discussion of the 2010 anime Wolverine. We'll never revisit it again, but we are firmly in the winter season of 2021. So, or actually, we're firmly in the season of winter 2011. So, our next anime, which is your choice, Sam, is Madoka Magica, is 10 years old. We feel so old because it felt just like yesterday when those magical girls were doing their magical girl thing and really breaking or being subversive. But we'll talk about that next time. So, Sam, let's wrap up this episode. Do you have anything to say?
Seems like we're at the end of the line here, bub.